Sahih al-Bukhari 185. Narrated Yahya al-Mazini. A person asked Abdullah bin Zayd, who was the grandfather of Amr bin Yahya, "Can you show me how Allah's messenger used to perform ablution?" Abdullah bin Zayd replied in the affirmative and asked for water. He poured it on his hands and washed them twice, then he rinsed his mouth thrice and washed his nose with water thrice by putting water in it and blowing it out. He washed his face thrice, and after that he washed his forearms up to the elbows twice and then passed his wet hands over his head from its front to its back and vice versa, beginning from the front and taking them to the back of his head up to the nape of the neck, and then brought them to the front again from where he had started, and washed his feet up to the ankles. Sahih al-Bukhari 186. Narrated Amr. My father saw Amr bin Abi Hassan asking Abdullah bin Zayd about the ablution of the Prophet. Abdullah bin Zayd asked for earthenware pot containing water and in front of them performed ablution like that of the Prophet. He poured water from the pot over his hand and washed his hands thrice, and then he put his hands in the pot and rinsed his mouth and washed his nose by putting water in it and then blowing it out with 3 handfuls of water. Again he put his hand in the water and washed his face thrice and washed his forearms up to the elbows twice, and then put his hands in the water and then passed them over his head by bringing them to the front and then to the rear of the head once, and then he washed his feet up to the ankles. Sahih al-Bukhari 187. Narrated Abu Juhayfa. Allah's messenger came to us at noon and water for ablution was brought to him. After he had performed ablution, the remaining water was taken by the people and they started smearing their bodies with it as a blessed thing. The Prophet offered 2 rakat of the Zuhr prayer and then 2 rakat of the Asr prayer, while a short spear, or stick, was there, as a sutra, in front of him. Sahih al-Bukhari 188. Abu Musa said, the Prophet asked for a tumbler containing water and washed both his hands and face in it and then threw a mouthful of water in the tumbler and said to both of us, Abu Musa and Bilal, drink from the tumbler and pour some of its water on your faces and chests. Sahih al-Bukhari 189. Narrated Ibn Shihab. Mahmud bin Arabi, who was the person on whose face the Prophet had ejected a mouthful of water from his family's well while he was a boy, and Urwa, on the authority of al-Muswar and others, who testified each other, said, whenever the Prophet performed ablution, his companions were nearly fighting for the remains of the water. Sahih al-Bukhari 190. Narrated as Sa'ib bin Yazid. My aunt took me to the Prophet and said, O Allah's Messenger, this son of my sister has got a disease in his legs. So he passed his hands on my head and prayed for Allah's blessings for me, then he performed ablution and I drank from the remaining water. I stood behind him and saw the seal of prophethood between his shoulders, and it was like the Zir al-Hijla, means the button of a small tent, but some said egg of a partridge, etc. There are several methods shared with us in the Ahadith of how our dear Prophet used to perform ablution. Some actions are shared to us in the count of 3 and same are also shared in twice, but the passing of wet hands over the head is always shown once. Also it lets us understand that there is no hard and fast rule in the count of the time we wash our body parts. The body parts do remain same, but the count of washing is changed, which indicates that the ablution is valid via all the methods unless we forget some body parts during the process. So we should always try our best to get all the body parts to be washed, as our hands, mouth, nose, face, hand to elbows, head, and feet all can be washed once, twice or thrice. May Allah guide us all to proper path.